So, Katarina, it's a pleasure to be in conversation with you. Where are you joining me from today?
I'm joining you from lovely Stockholm, and it's a sunny day, and it's just been great for the last couple of the weeks. Uh, I wish it was years, but I don't know if you know that many Swedes, but we're obsessed with weather.
Just like the
Be-
Pogues.
and it's just been sunny the day, week after week after week after week now.
Oh, that sounds gorgeous. Well, it's good for the mood for sure.
Yes.
So, given that you're in this lovely sunny moment with some lovely weather, I wonder if that's going to influence your answer to the first question. And I like to ask all of my guests this opening question, and it's what do you feel or think or sense is going on in the global human psyche right now? If we can take that frame and play with it.
What's going on now in the psyche? I think it's a couple of things that kind of gets into a good mixer, and then I think we are more or less on the same page. If we are in the safe part of the world, not saying that we are not suffering or feeling pain or anything, but if you're not in a trauma in that sense that you are in war or
Yeah.
you're starving, you actually have a job, or you are somewhere in kind of a bit more mature part of the world. I think it's three things. I think most people are actually still struggling with the aftermath of the pandemic, without knowing it or knowing it. And I think it's both physical and but for sure in your psychic. And I think it shows up in so different ways. But I think people feel more tired than they think they supposed to be. I think a lot of people have some kind of post something stress, that they can't really recognize because they never been in a pandemic before
Mm,
or
mm,
been in lockdowns, or and now it almost, I think, also in the combination of people don't, can I still talk about this, or is it that, or is something else going on, or is it just a shift in my life? So I think that post, and I don't think it is traumatic. I think it's post something that we haven't found a word for.
mm.
Pandemic stress. The second thing is, I think right now a lot of exciting things. I would like to think of it like that, but also I that's how I experience it. But exciting things can also be exhausting things, right? And overwhelming. So right now, what I think a lot of people are thinking, trying out and trying to get their brains around is AI, generative AI, and LLMs, and what that actually means, and how fast. And it's not when is it coming; it's already here.
Yeah.
And um, and I think the natural brain goes into different ways depending on how you usually tackle things, right?
Mm,
So you will have the people that are not as excited as I am. It doesn't mean that I'm naive or necessarily stupid and don't understand that it also comes with a couple of things.
mm,
But you also have the people that usually go, oh, I'm skeptic, and this will happen in a decade or 1,000 years. And then I think you have the larger kind of population where, oh, this is really scary, and what does it mean for me?
yeah.
But it's also pretty cool. And I think all of that is overwhelming. So I think those two in combination right now, I think the state of the union and the state of most people or human minds are actually, ooh, I think it's like the climate. I think it's quite hot right now. I think it's boiling a bit.
Mm, mm. I love the different layers that you're kind of touching on there. And so let's connect that then with your work as Chief Human Resources Officer at
Mm.
Spotify. And I imagine that given the position that you're in, working with people, thinking about organizations, the individual and collective potential that we hold, the question I'd like to ask you, perhaps in connection with your work, but I'd like to kind of go to a deeper route, is what do you most profoundly love?
At work.
It can be at work or it can be in life.
Because I think it's two things. I really think it's important not to define yourself with what you do. I think you are much more interesting than your job. And I
Yeah.
happen to love my job, right? So work is very important things, and that's why I'm not really fond of the etiquette or the label of work-life balance, because I think work is a very big part of life. And ask anybody that is outside the labor market and wants to be part of it, right? So it's more about, for me, work, family, and family could be friends if you don't have your own family, but you then maybe belong. It could be sports, it could be whatever. So I think it's about work, family balance. But what do I love? Or what do I feel passionate about? I think it's kind of how we rethink and we have to rewire how we think about work. I think there's a lot of challenges, but it's also a lot of things that we don't have the answer to. So being a behavioral science scientist, I think work has never been more challenging, harder, more fun, and more exciting. So I'm quite passionate about what does that mean. The other thing, which is hard not to say that you're passionate about, is your friends and your family.
Yeah.
It's the small things that are not small, when you start to think about what can happen, right? So I think they need to be connected. So keeping my balance, which changes also from day to day. So it's not one of those, I need to catch that wet soap of this is the perfect balance. I think it has to do with, what's important to you that day.
Yeah.
And that could be way too many hours at work. It also could be one of those, I really need a break and not think about anything else than relaxing or spending time with my nearest and my dearest.
That kind of quality of discernment, which I think we all
Mm,
need.
mm,
So let's talk a little bit about your work at Spotify and redefining the HR department, because I think one of the things that's come up a lot, you mentioned earlier the disruption from AI, the excitement about it, but also the fear that many people have, and different forms of fear. And so when we're thinking about organizations, and of course AI and automation, we have to talk about people
mm,
and the role of the HR department in its purpose and what it does. And in your new book, which I don't believe is out yet in English, but I'll give the English translation to the title, which is
mm,
Bold Strategic HR in a New Era, you write about, and I'd love to quote this, the importance of role models, civil courage, clear direction, and passion. And that just like for super talented musicians, it's difficult to be part of a concerted orchestra without a conductor who dares to step up, show up, and openly take risks. So, from there, I'd love to ask, within the context of people and an organization, what does good leadership mean to you if we're thinking about like the conductor and the orchestra?
That's a great question. But first of all, it was really nice to hear part of your book read by somebody else out loud. I really liked that. And I'm like, oh my God, did we write that? Um,
It's such
yeah.
a beautiful quote as well.
Yeah. No, but I think that sums up quite why it is a good time to be active, and also, first of all, be part of a band, right? You're always, I think, the universal drivers, no matter who you are, where you are, what pocket of the world, or what you do for a living, right, is some sort of autonomy. Because I don't think, if you look at it from an organization, you don't want to recruit or hire grown-ups and then treat them like children. That will
Yeah.
backfire for sure. But then you go to yourself, and somebody, or an organization or a corporation or whatever you would like to call, if you are treated like that, most of us, no matter if we are mature and not like teenager and want to hey, um, state that you are like a person of free will, like all the time. I think still as a grown up, you go, hey, don't tell me what to do. It
Yeah.
will take away my willingness, but also I think the what we all are born with. And then if you're lucky enough, somebody will not crush and destroy and take away what comes natural, which is being passionate curious, right? And that being passionate curious about things, I think, is one of the most important things to stay relevant, to be employable. But also, as an employer, that is what you're looking for, right? So
Mm.
it's not necessarily adoption all the time. It's not necessarily the things that we usually train people. It's more about how can you make sure that your parents and then school and then society, but also workplace don't kill that, because with that curiosity, the willing and the ability to learn and upskill, of course, reskill. And I think more and more important when everything is moving faster and faster to also off skill, right? You
Mm.
can't just press new things into your head. So how do we as a serious employer, how do we do as a lean in HR team, how do we make sure that we take our responsibility to not kill that curiosity? How do we make sure that work life, where it's a lot about
Mm.
performance, but you still have the smorgasbord of how do I make sure that I add things into kind of the thing that makes up me? So the individual, when the individual, right, as we say, when he, she, they grow, the company grows. When they are doing well, we are doing well. So
Mm.
how do you tend to that without getting into a pampering state of mind? Or because the pampering is not about like we should spoil them or they get entitled. I think it takes away the propeller and the urge of I want to learn new things.
Yeah.
I want to try new things. So it's a delicate touch, right? The second thing with AI and with most likely some redundancies in skills, again, how do we lean in and really try to be proactive so we reskill and upskill people so they still are relevant for the
Mm.
next stage, right? Where the base of the foundation of the knowledge, capabilities, and personality is relevant enough. And if we know that it's more of the things that we usually didn't necessarily say was important into organization, and I don't, and I'm not going to go into that because I don't want it to make it about semantics. So I'm going to use what most people say, but soft skill did not necessarily pay that much, or it wasn't very important or strategic, or it was something that some roles had
Yeah.
where more one gender was.
Yeah.
But hey, if you start to think about AI and the democracy that it will also help you with so many things, and how it will take away a lot of the things that are repetitive and not necessarily all that smart work, what are the things that most likely will take longer if we actually think that most of the changes will already be around the corner in 2, 5, 7 years? It is obviously things that where empathy is needed,
Mm.
strategy is needed. Hey, how do you put in meaningfulness, which is important to all humans,
Mm.
purpose driven, like the vision, all the things that are soft skills. Um, so I think it's about to try to put more new types of mental clothes on people. So when the shift comes, that has already started, that you don't have your summer clothes on when it's time for the winter, because the winter will otherwise come and it will be pretty cold.
Mm.
So these things are the things that the team and I are very excited about. That actually being a behavior scientist, I think it's like the coming decade. It's going to be the shit. It's going to be cool. It's going to be, but together with technology, it's not
Mhm.
either or. It's going to be in combination with, and
Yes.
that's a quite new, really, really, really strategic era around the
Mm.
corner.
So it's interesting you're talking about how we might be better prepared for when the winter comes, because this season in particular, I'm interested in what we mean by resilience when we use that word, what it
Mm,
means to cultivate an ability to adapt, to make sense of complexity. And in your book, you write that courageous and impactful HR is not only about culture, but
mm,
also a long term vision and a short term plan. And I think this is one of these things where, in the face of uncertainty and tumult and volatility and complexity, how we conceive of the next plausible steps that we can make, how far ahead we can see into the future when there's so much uncertainty, and orienting that along the lines of a bigger vision.
mm.
Obviously, the steps might need to change, but the orientation remains the same. How do you see people in your world, in the world of HR, conceiving of resilience, and what can we do to become more resilient?
It's one of those. Is that something that you are born with? Is that a trait, or is that something that you can develop? Obviously, I believe that you can develop and grow that, but you have to practice it. And
Mm,
then I think when you practice it, I think one of those receipts that you get, well, it didn't kill you, right?
yeah.
And it very fast it made you stronger. And we are all born with a spine, and we just need to use it in that sense that if you come from a warm place, the message could be quite harsh in so many ways because you're trying to help an individual or a team or an organization or the whole company to survive. But it's one of those you hear a lot, especially in HR. You hear a lot like, okay, there's a new open role, we're recruiting for that. They want to do a big change. It's going to be all about this. The culture is like needs to evolve, or there needs to be a big change. So they have done the diagnose, but they don't want to swallow the medicine, right? So
Classic.
how do you make sure that everybody understands what you're doing, especially if you sit on a bit more information than most? And then you also have to come to terms with what Nietzsche said, and I think he was 100% right. People don't have to like your decision; they just have to understand it. So you
Mm,
have to over-index on information in so many ways that they are okay. I don't like it. I think it's too early. Or before, when I didn't know anything, it didn't make sense. And we have taught a lot of people to say that they like change, but the honest kind of fact is this: people don't like change, because then they wouldn't be human beings. People only like change that they initiated themselves,
yeah.
but people can cope with change that they understand why they need, because then they have like, okay, I get it, it's going to be cold, but I didn't feel like putting like that jacket on because
Yeah.
it craps my style, or whatever it is. So it's one of those. I think you have to be a bit of a storyteller. I think you need to be daring enough to open the kimono as much so you can tell the story and get everybody on board, and also let people understand that the train is leaving the platform, and you can get off on any stop if this is not your ride. But staying or being in the station when we leave is not necessarily a good decision, right? Because we need to move, and it's tiring with change. But we try to prepare people before they join Spotify, when they are onboarded, but also when they hear that change is our constant. And other companies might say that, but they might not have the courage, or be brave enough to
Mm,
live by it. And then you go, I don't want to do change because it might not sit really well with everybody, or we needed to do a change 2 months ago and here's something else. But that is, you need to both learn, but you sometimes need to change faster than the world is changing, right? And but you also have to admit that that is really tiring, and that most people have like an inner brake, and will pump that brake and not go, yeah, this is the
yeah.
best thing ever, let's do another change, and on top of that a change. So so these are the things that you need to kind of smoothly try to use the different levers, right, when you do change management. But you also need to do this, which I tell my team: look yourself in the mirror. If you are change averse, how on earth will you be the propellers and also the change agents in the organization? You have to swallow your own medicine too, right?
Mm,
And it's not about they need to change, or they don't understand, or I will have the managers or the rest. So you have to add a system from inside out, not necessarily top down or bottom up, but the people that will guide you, inform you, and also make sure that, hey, everybody's on board that wants to be on board. You have to be maybe leading from the front, in that sense that can't go, it's for them and not for us,
yeah.
right?
It's tricky. I can feel myself constricting in my body listening to you talking about change, because it's very easy to kind of and I, do thinking and writing and speaking quite a bit, and it's comfortable, right?
Mm,
You can exercise, imagine all scenes in your mind to your heart's content. But actually, when it comes into physical changes,
mm,
making different decisions about, what you're going to do in your work, where you're going to apply new skills, it's uncomfortable and it requires resource and commitment and I think I often think of it as like bandwidth. You have to be well resourced and have the bandwidth to be able to take yourself to these limits. And so I wonder, one of the things that you also point out in the book is around this idea of mutual benefit, and that's something that HR really holds at its heart. And so when you're encouraging people to embrace more change, especially when we're talking about increasing automation, AI integration, but especially you're in Spotify. Spotify is one of the big companies that is really pioneering some of the changes that then trickle down to those of us who are not working directly in technology. What are the greatest challenges you see, either from kind of people coping with change perspective or directing that change, knowing where to lead the rest of the technological world? Because when you're
mm,
such a big player,
mm,
that's also you have a role as stewards almost in shaping the future technology.
mm. I think one of the things, if you are in a leading position, especially I think in what is our core business, product and tech in so many ways, I think one of the typical tricks, no matter who you are or what, if it's a small or big feat or charge that you have in ahead of yourself, I think you should not take on the burden of thinking that you are a role model in that sense that the world is watching, because then I think it's very hard to be courageous.
Yeah.
I think you should just go back to what your roots are, and what, if you are like we, a data informed company, and you also have some experience, you mix that in a box. And when you have enough, not all, when you have enough data, or you are feeling confident, you should just, go with confidence, but also be humble enough to iterate, um, and admit when everything when the open bet is proven to be a losing bet, and celebrate when it's a winning bet. But it's still about the learnings, right? You do more learning sometimes when you go the wrong way, but you
Yeah.
had at the time all the right data points saying. So as always, well, you have to not just connect the dots, you need to collect them first, and then it's all about execution. But for to be able to execute, especially something that is contrarian, back to why you need to be, brave or have the courage to do so. So it goes down to some sort of leadership too. And
Mm.
I know that it's well debated, and I use a metaphor that usually is not necessarily all that um, um, okay, but I usually say to at least my team, and I dare to say to the rest of the teams also at Spotify, but I view data, and I prefer when we say that we are data informed rather than data led, because I think data is like a bikini. It shows a lot, but it hides the most important parts, and it's easy to be seduced. And I know that in outside HR, when you say, "Hey, listen, trust my instincts or intuition," people forget that intuition is actually experience. It's something. It's not something that is flimsy or like coming from the air or something like that. It's something that you have done or practiced so many times that without the data points, even everything tells you to go right, but you think it's smarter at this point to go left. And this is also where the contrarian, and also if you then succeed, the reward will be much higher.
Mm.
Obviously, if it's a mistake, one, you don't owe up to it, two, you don't learn from it, not so good. But once in a while, you have to do that, because playing it safe will only keep you at the same place forever and ever. And
Mm.
that game is the most dangerous game. So I think
Yeah.
it's about having a game plan, a philosophy, I think also it has to do with your, operating model or MO, but for sure you have to also build a culture where it's okay, and these parts are well thought through of, okay, how do we react as a collective when we do these things? Or do we punish the brave, right? Or do we put them on a pedestal, which might not be good either, because then you only do really crazy stuff all over the place, and everybody like, yeah, but at least I tried, and you go, oh, yeah, but not so clever, right? So it's one of those where I think sometimes a lot of organizations think they end up with a culture, or that you can't really build or have culture or leadership or a full kind of back to the orchestra, that it kind of it just ends up being something. And I believe on the opposite, and I believe that it's not necessarily molded, and for sure not by only HR, but you have a deliberate plan and you're intentional about everything. And then it's also easier for the people to choose if they want to join or not join, if this is something for them or not. It's also no easier for us to know what a culture add-on would be,
Yeah.
so you don't go into the trap of only having culture fits.
Okay. So I'm wondering where to take this conversation next, because there's a few things I'm keen to ask you. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you is around where you see the next big innovations happening, whether it's like an iterative thing or something that's going to be a massive game changer from the tech side. But I also want to spend a little bit more time exploring with you again around this people adapting element, what you see as the most exciting challenges and opportunities for HR, for the workplace, and how that might develop. Because I think we're at a point of key potential for transformation.
Mm.
And so I don't know which of those tracks you'd like to go down first. Maybe you can pick what appeals more to you.
Yeah, or as maybe I derail as usual, and then I mix all of them,
Go
and
for it.
then you keep me real. But I think one of the really cool things that will happen in one way or another is automation, right? And in a way that we might not have seen since we all went from farming into some sort of industrialization, um, where we gained efficiency without necessarily working harder.
Hmm.
But a lot of people had a total different job. And we have seen iterations, and I think we even have taken in our mouth words like paradigm shifts. But I think what we are going to experience, all of us that are lucky to be in a workplace, in the very, very near future, I think we will see one of those paradigm shifts where automation, due to new technology, will actually change a lot of things for a lot of things. I also think that the currency, if I put it like that, I think the currency of different roles or professions will be turned maybe a bit under its head, and I think that will be devastating for some, and winning the lottery for others. And I think it will be fewer of professions too, most likely, where it might have been a scarcity due to the technology. So I think it's going to be a lot of things to digest, but also have a plan. And as usually when we do gains too, historically at least, it's like, or when you make more money, you find new holes to put the money in. And the
Hmm.
same when you go efficiency, you make up something else. Humanity usually comes up with something where, okay, let's do this now instead. But but there are a couple of things that are quite interesting that I think, and I think it spells, because I don't have a better word, and we might use a different word in the future when we know exactly what it looks like. But I think if you go just to G&A, if we leave product and tech and design or engineering for a while, if you go into the classical, legal, finance, marketing, PR comms, HR, the G&A, right, functions or support functions or staff functions, whatever you would like to call them, what if automation looked 100% different than it does today, and how many of these teams in most of the world, public or private sector, is automized at all.
Mm.
I would challenge and say, or maybe be even provocative and say, most of them zero,
Mm.
right? And I don't necessarily think that they are all that data informed either. I don't think even that they are having AI in their processes today. And the technology for that has been around for several years.
Mm.
So I think it's one of those, we might be scared, or we hide behind it's not compliant, or mm, uh, mm, can't really do that, or it's not, it's actually the law we are talking about. So do you want that to be automized? But what are these really big, large, language models? What are they capable to do already?
Yeah.
It has a lot to do with black text on white background, right? But what I'm not saying is that we don't need lawyers. We might need even more. But now they will do the things that is really tricky rather than all the time consuming. I need to read up on the full
Mm.
case. I need to write everything is in perfect kind of legal language. That could be maybe automized. So the things that needs the human brain or the consciousness, right? Um, what happens then?
Mm.
So sometimes I want to not fast forward, and sometimes I just want to fast forward and see what it actually means. But I don't want to hit the stop button, and I don't want to rewind. Those are the only two things I know. But sometimes it's like with the spring and summer living in the Nordics, you want it to be longer and slower, right? So we have
Yeah.
more of it before the darkness and the cold comes back. And I think it's the same thing. But I also, when winter comes and it's cold and crispy, you realize that the snow and the ice skating and skiing is not so bad. So it's going to be it's going to be a lot of things. I don't think it's going to be minor things. It's going to be a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. So for people listening to this, and there's a whole bunch of different folks who'll be listening to this thinking, all right, well, what do I do? How do I wrap up? What kind of coach should I buy to extend the metaphor? And you mentioned earlier soft skills and our capacity for visioning and empathizing and sort of that sort of realm of things. If we are retraining people
Hmm.
and we're looking to find ways in which we can contribute to society, because I don't think work is going to suddenly go away. The nature of work may well
Hmm.
change, people's roles will change. You mentioned earlier about certain industries maybe being tipped on their head. So I can imagine, if you think about emotional labor being something that AI cannot do yet,
Hmm.
that then we come to prize more highly, maybe that suddenly changes all sorts of things in the world of work. But I'm wondering, what are some of the things that you personally are thinking about that will have greater importance and value and weight in terms of skills that people can also focus on, like developing for themselves?
So if I look in my closest kind of circle, which would be then the HR team, even if I have other teams too, I think it's the combination of what we actually are trying to describe in the book. It is to really use the knowledge that you have on behaviors, because I think it will. But if you only have them but don't air them, use them, talk about them, and if you're not being well, if you don't have the courage to do so, even if when it's not asked for or it's not welcomed, and especially if people are a bit scared about the changes, then I don't think your skill set will be or come to use. I think though, but if you combine them and you do what I think everybody should do now, so from our side, I think we need to learn as fast as we can everything that has to do with technology. And from the other side, the people that are very good at technology, even if the technology new, and I'm just now being a bit like thinking that most likely it's easier for engineers to also get the new technology faster than the people that are not engineers. I think for them to try to develop some soft skills.
Hmm.
So I think it's the crossover that is a bit new. And not that we will become engineers, because the engineers do that so much better. And not for the engineers to become, experts on soft skill and exercise that all the time. Because if they were interested and really good at that, they would have chosen, right? But I
Yeah.
think that crossover will be more important, because I think it's very much needed, so you don't forget about the humanity within the new intersectionality of the new technology.
Mhm.
So I think that is one thing. The other thing is, I think it's going to be key to not think that you can get aboard much later. I think it's actually starting to study again, in a way that, okay, what does it mean for us? And try the chat GPTs, and hey, even if it's maybe just a stage of how do you prompt, and if your colleague prompts better, he, she, they get a better answer and all
Mm.
that. But surely that is a stage for the big computers. Then they will start to ask you the right questions, and then you answer them. So then you don't have to be as good as on prompting. But why not play around with it so you understand what it is? So it's not scary. I think
Yeah.
I think that is the biggest important thing. It can't be scary, and it can't be like science fiction, or it's around the corner, or I will even retire before it happens. And then I'm excited about another thing in the neuro, and this is a word I can't say, so I say a word that is very close to it, but I can't pronounce it. But in the neurodiversity, and there is another word for it, but you will surely, and the listeners will understand what I'm trying to say. There is a lot of things that we know for a fact too.
Mhm.
So, for instance, the people like myself that, and I didn't necessarily struggle, but it came with a lot of things. So I had to crack the code and do things a bit different, because I have dyslexia, right? But there are a couple of things that are pretty cool with the new technology, especially when the prompting is not written in the future,
Hmm.
and that's just around the corner, where you can actually talk to the computer, he, she, or the computer. Now I also put almost a gender on it, but
Yes. Yeah.
but it answers you with a text that will be perfect, which is perfect, and in all languages, right? Which will be, hey, I'm now on a much more even playing
Playing
field
field.
like everybody else. And here it's, oh, now the technology is working and democratizing something that I can do that I couldn't do before.
Mm.
Or I could actually try out to do a bit of coding or making music, um, because the computer is helping you with the things that doesn't have to do with my creativity or my wish or what makes me happy. I want to build something. Most people want to do that. Or I want to write something, and it would be lovely to write something that is perfect and has all the vowels and not just the consonants, right? But the other thing is, with the skill set that you most likely develop, and it's not for all people, but a lot of people with dyslexia, is that you can take decisions faster with less information, and the speed and the need for speed and the power of focus. All of a sudden, technology might now help people that were told already in school that maybe you are a bit stupid. Oh,
Mm.
you're not. And what if all kids that struggles with different with a variation, if we could actually apply without having as many teachers as pupils, with the knowledge in focus, but we teach the students where they are. And here I think technology will be fascinating, and I think that will continue in the work life.
Mm.
So yes, we can talk about ethical things, and we can talk about the scary things, and that could hold us back, right? But instead, let's lean in and like just jump into this pool of possibilities and opportunities. And yes, there will be people that will use this technology for bad, but there's always been, right? And
Mhm.
we don't create societies or even laws for the people that don't understand what it is to coexist. It's actually most people do understand it, even if we didn't know the concept, right? So there's so many things that are pretty cool now, and I'm not a tech geek, but I'm not averse to it either.
Mm.
And I think it's helpful now. Back to the trying to find a way of staying passionate, curious, and having that open doors rather than close them.
I think that propensity to play is also really important. You mentioned this at an early part of the conversation, which is it's something that happens later that gets shut down. And so if we can find a way to not shut that down in
Mm.
systemic ways, but also to reignite that flame or to turn up that flame when we see it in others, sounds like a really affirmative way to start. So we're coming to the end of the podcast section. And I have 3 questions to close out
Mm.
this bit before we go to the quick fire
Mm.
Patreon round. So I'd like to ask, perhaps in the realm of how you've remained open and playful and curious, what tools or practices have been invaluable to you?
So first one, I might be cheating, but I think the playfulness comes from that I'm pretty silly as a person and quite childish, to be honest. And the second thing is a debate I had quite early with my father when I said I think work needs to be fun, and he said like you don't go to the funny, you go to work, and it's named like that for a reason. But I think he was wrong. He was right in so many ways, and that's why he's also mentioned in the book.
Mm,
But I think he was wrong here because what you find to be nice, fun, and funny, you usually turn out to be quite good at.
hmm,
And there's nothing that is versus or opposite of being childish or playful and being professional, right? And it's back to the courage. Just try to be a bit more yourself and a bit silly or quirky or whatever you are. People will not go like, "Oh, so you can't be the CHRO and be silly." Obviously, you can. I think these are the things that it's not so much about practicing. I think it's just go back to who you are, and I
mm,
think we all have a piece of that, but then we try to hide that, or we think that that was for school or for friends or for family, not for work life. And I think that is a waste of energy. And I
mm,
think that energy actually makes you better at your work, no matter if it's about learning or doing things or in conflicts or whatever, when you need to have a lot of energy to kind of just push through. The second part that I think you can learn, and you have, it's one of those, most of the things you have to do a lot of times. You just have to practice things, right? And
yeah.
and you get better at it. And you also have to find your style. People that are good presenters, they don't present the same way. People that are good storytellers, they have different styles
Mm,
of telling a story. So you have to find who you are and not try to mimic. I think that is very important with the different things that you do. And then the last thing is most people are actually looking for something that obviously there are people that are not, but most people, most of us wants to have kind of a safe haven but still
mm,
develop there. And most of us have bills to pay and want to live in somewhere where it's like pretty warm and eat food every day. So work is important. And the most important way or the best way to keep a job is two things: that the organization that you work for is doing well and you are doing your part.
mm,
There are no other ways. You need to lead with your work, and part of the new work life that's been around for a long time is long life learning. That's not like I went to university 20 years ago and here, I'm still an expert. No,
mm.
you're not. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
classic.
Very few people are, right? Or you might be, but then nobody needs that product or that service that you were an expert if nothing
Yeah.
developed for 20 years. So these are the things that we need to remind ourselves of, that you have to, it's a hit remind, that is life. You
Mm,
need to. And then I think the last piece that we sometimes forget to say to the young adults today: life is not fair. It's going to be hardships, but it's going to be plenty of the good times too.
mm,
And it will not kill you in the downs if you don't let it. So you have to work on the grits, right?
yeah.
The guts, the resilience, the tenacity. These are the things that are really, really important in life. And and if you only expect that you will be 100% in love with everything and everyone all the time, or it's going to be from one great thing to another, and then it's going to be, no, especially if the biggest gift in life is given to you, that you have a long life,
Mm.
and right, it's going to be ups and downs, and you have to love, or at least learn how to embrace that too.
Okay, so on that note, I'd love to just ask you where people can best find you and the book, and then we'll move to the Patreon round. So, where can people find you and the book and your work?
So the best way to find me and my team and the work that we do is actually we started a blog that is Spotify HR blog a lot of many, many, many years ago, because a lot of we got like hundreds, and then it turned out to be 200, and then at 300 emails a week of, can we come and visit, and can you tell us how you work, and panels and keynotes, and we believe in open source, and we were turning down 99% because we
Oh.
needed to really help this company in the hypergrowth. So then we started the Spotify blog, and there we write about the good and the bad and the ugly. So there you can follow us. Then because we do podcast and we are an audio company, we started a VOD slash a pod, depending if you want to see and listen or just listen. That is called HR Over the Counter, or HR The Real Deal if you go to YouTube. But I think you should go to Spotify. So then it's HR Over the Counter.
Cheeky plug.
Yes, yes. And the book, yes, you are right. Bold, the strategic HR work in the new era is only in Swedish
For
now,
now.
but it was actually written in English to begin with, and then for different reasons, we went back to a Swedish publishing house, or it's actually Finnish, and wrote it in Swedish, and now it's out in Swedish, but there will be an English version coming, but I don't really know when.
Okay.
We need to do the work first for Spotify and the book, but the book is the same thing. It's the open source thinking, and as long as people are asking us, we would like to share. And then on LinkedIn, of course.
Okay. Lovely. Well, it's been such a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for your
It was my
time.
pleasure.
And now I'll do a quick fire round. I've got you till 1:15. So for Patreon, we might not get through all of the usual questions, but I will start with some of them. If you could go back to your child self, young Katarina, and
Mm.
give her some advice, what would it be?
First of all, I would tell myself, when you finish high school, don't panic for a full year because you don't know what you want to be when you become a grown up, because I did that. I would also say that don't plan anything in life, because the only thing that comes with planning, especially with your personality, Katarina, is that you will be disappointed.
Oh,
And then the third thing is, you're good the way you are, I think I would say.
that's lovely. That's very touching. Um, I'm curious also, amidst all the change, if there is something that roots you or anchors you.
My family roots and anchors me. I've been blessed with the best mom and dad and sister, and family is really, really important. And I think all my time that I'm not traveling or working, it's my either my thoughts, if I'm not with them, or check-ins on a daily basis
Mm.
still, if it works time zone wise. So that really, and I think also my mom is not Swedish, she's Japanese,
Hmm.
so it's always been one of those, whatever you do, and even if she's proud and she's generous enough to tell you, it's always harder, faster, stronger, better. With that, you cannot be complacent. It keeps you humble and trying.
Yes, I can well imagine. I'd also like to ask you if there is a story or a quote or an idea that you feel has changed the course of your life in a bigger or smaller way?
In one way, I think meeting Daniel and what he told me when I finally said yes to come work for me actually changed my life in so many ways. Because it's been a hard journey in 4 passages where the first 2 years I could have been without, and the last 8 years has just been amazing in so many different ways. And I think that has been work life changing in so many ways. On a personal note, I think it's two quotes that has followed me very long. One is that, you know, what is the English word for coincidence? Put people together, and life separates people. And I think that has been helpful because I met so many amazing people in my life. And now I'm thinking both obviously private, but now but mostly in the professional life, people come and go, right? Because
Yeah.
otherwise I would have clinged on to things where I like, okay, it's really nice and comfortable in this spa. I know people that harness some more fruit and all that, and I also like these people. But knowing that, or at least living by that, I you should leave the party when it's still fun.
Yeah.
So I've done that, right? So I always left a job and a team and friends in work life when I was super sad and cried my eyes out for the last week, and then never looked back.
Oh.
I'm very like pragmatic that way. So that is one quote that is important. And then there is another quote that kind of also guides me in life. But that is for me to know and for you to find out.
Oh, I love that one. That's great. Very tempting. So, is there a person that has had a particular influence or been a particular inspiration to you that you think people should know about?
There's actually 3 people. I already mentioned 2 of them. My father was a sea captain,
Wow.
and in psychology, you talk about a couple of institutions that are closed, right? And where nobody can get off, but you're very, very dependent of each other. And a ship is like that. And front row, I saw his leadership, and I think that has actually very much hands-on guided me in my own leadership. But I didn't know that and understand that until maybe I had my third job as a manager or leader. And I'm grateful for that. And the second person, the strongest person I know is my mom, and she moved from one part of the world to another part of the world when you didn't travel that much, and where they in her country didn't know about the country where she moved.
Wow.
And I think she sacrificed a lot. Obviously, she did that for love, and that was a winning bet because they were married until my father passed away.
Oh.
So I think, and she's still alive. She's soon to turn 90.
Oh.
So she's another one where it comes to how she conducts herself. But on the outside, I think there is one Swedish politician that I did not vote for, but I thought leadership wise, and I think of her a lot. And she was the foreign minister of Sweden for a while, and until she got assassinated. And her name was
Oh.
Anna Lind. And leadership wise, I think she's a person that I don't know her, and I didn't work close to her, but it's one of those people I th- I have not put on a pedestal, but I liked what I have read and heard about her leadership style.
And finally, because we're at time, what question do you want people to dwell with?
Ooh, that was a good one. What do I want them to dwell with? Well, being very impatient, I don't want people to dwell on anything, but But what I want people to debate is and think about how we get kindness to be in fashion again.
Beautiful. Katarina, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure being in conversation with you.
Thank you for having me. It was nice. It was also very nice to listen to your radio voice and be reminded that I don't have one.